Hello everybody, this is Joshua Maul and welcome to part 3 of my electric guitar modeling tutorial series here on Blender Cookie. In this part we're going to be focusing on all of the hardware pieces that are connected to the neck, so we'll be doing the tuning keys and the frets, and that's pretty much it. We'll also be adding in the strings in this part and making any final minor adjustments and tweaks that we need to get this thing ready to go for part 4, which will cover UV unwrapping, texturing, and getting you basically set up to jump over to Kent Trammell's guitar rendering tutorial, also here on Blender Cookie, and render out a sweet looking electric guitar. So without too much of my chatting, let's just jump in and get this modeling done. Alright, so here we are at the end of part 2. We got all of the hardware on our guitar body all set and ready to go. And you can see I've already loaded in a reference image for some of the hardware up on our headstock, which we'll get to that here in just a little bit. Before we do anything, let's take a look at where we left our neck. Now, if you remember from part 2, I just moved it to another layer to kind of get it out of the way. So I'm going to go down here and select this second layer, and now we can see just our neck and how it's looking. Now, after looking at it for a few days, I realized there's a few things on the neck that I'm not 100% happy with that I want to fix before we start adding hardware to it. One of the things is the edge right here, along here, I think really needs to be a little bit sharper. So I'm going to select this, tab into edit mode, and you can see that up here the edge is fairly sharp because this edge loop here is right up on it. But down here, as it gets towards the body of the guitar, it spreads out a little bit. It's not nearly as close to this edge here, and that's why it's not nearly as sharp. Well, I don't want to move everything since up here I think this is sharp enough. We just want to adjust it down here. So I'm going to deselect everything and just go in and manually select these vertices right here, just like that, and then hit Control E, edge slide, and just slide them up. And that looks pretty good. And I probably also want to adjust these two. I'm not sure if I can edge slide with just Control X. What did I do? I'm not sure if I can edge slide with just a vertices selected. No, I can't. So what we'll do is with those selected, we'll just hit G and Y, pull them along the Y-axis just a little bit. Okay. All right, there we go. That's sharpened up that edge a lot better. The next thing I want to adjust really quick, we hit 3 to go into a side view mode. This it's too fat right back in here. It should be not this thin, but it should be a lot more uniform from this point down to around this point where it starts to curve off. So to do that, tab back into edit mode, hit Z to go into wireframe, and I'm going to grab these right here and just pull them in a little bit. And maybe I'm going to add an edge loop right in here. That way I can grab these and there we go. Alright, now that looks a little bit better. I like that much better. Okay. Let's see, there's one other thing I want to adjust before we actually get started here, and that is the front of the fretboard here itself. On most guitars, and this is not every guitar, but on most guitars, the top of the fretboard here has a slight curvature in it, something like this. It's a little bit rounded. Now, this is not every guitar ever made, but I have only seen a handful of them that have an actual flat fretboard, and that does not include the guitar that I'm making right now. It is, slightly, I wonder if we can see it. Well, it's not real obvious here, but it is, they are slightly rounded. Not a lot, just a little. But, that little bit of rounding is going to make a big difference when it comes to reflections and when you start getting all the materials and texturing all set up. So we're going to do this really simply. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to select these first vertices, or these center vertices all along right here, hit G and Y and just pull them out along the Y-axis slightly, just a little bit, and you can see that it's given it, if I can zoom in here, it's given it kind of that roundness, but it is very, very slight, and that's what we want, because it is not it's definitely not round, but it's also not flat. So okay, with that being done, I think that our neck is in a much better overall shape, and we can start adding some hardware. So there's really only two major pieces of hardware that we'll be looking at in this part, which is going to be a good break from last week, which was an endurance round. So basically, all we have the tuning key setup here, which is going to involve all of the stuff behind the headstock, including the actual tuning key here, and then this bit here that actually holds the strings, and then the fretwork actually going down. Excuse me, hope I'm not losing my voice. I got work to do. The fretwork actually going down the front of the neck here, and we're going to finish up by adding in these strings. And actually, we're also going to be adding in one piece of hardware on the body that I forgot in the last part. In fact, I forgot when I made my actual guitar model as well. So I figured, what the heck, we'll just throw it in this part just to get it there. It's pretty easy. All right. So without any further delay, let's jump in and model this hardware right here. Now I'm going to start with this here, partially because I have the reference image already there. So if we take a look at our backdrop reference image, we can kind of see the placement of where these go, and you can see that they don't, they sort of line up, they follow the curve of the headstock round. It's not super apparent in the reference image, but you can see that they're about the same distance from the edge of the headstock all the way around, and the headstock is very obviously curved. So they sort of follow in line along this. So we look here, we can see that we have several different pieces. We've got sort of this flat washer here, we've got this nut going right here, and then this post coming up through, which is actually coming up through all the way from down here. This is going through the headstock, and when you turn this, it turns this, and that allows you to tighten or loosen the string that is wrapped around it. And now we know everything we need to know about guitar tuning, except how to actually tune the guitar. Okay. So we'll start. I'm actually going to do this in two pieces. The first piece, I'm going to model the nut, and the second piece, I'm going to model this washer and then extend this post up out of that. Since this is flat on the headstock, this back on the back, when we get to it, is flat against the headstock on the back, there's no way you're going to see this post going from here all the way up here. I don't see a reason to model it that way. I think it'd be easier just to do it like this. So that's how we're going to do it. So we'll start with this little nut piece, which is similar to the input jack we did on the body, but you can see it's a little bit thicker. So, we're just going to go Shift A, add in a circle, change the vertices down to 6, find our guy here, rotate along the x-axis by 90 degrees, move it up to about where it's going to go, tab into edit mode, scale it way down until it sort of matches up with our reference. And again, I'm going for, I kind of like a stylized look on things like this more so than 100% realistic. So some of these proportions on my end may be exaggerated. I believe this is one of the ones I sort of scaled up a little bit just to exaggerate the look. So, if you're going for a more photorealistic rendition and you have a much better reference image to represent that, then by all means, go for it. This is just, my personal aesthetic. Okay, so we've got this here. Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to hit E to extrude and then S to scale. And I want to scale this down. Go back to my reference here so that it's about the size of this post, because we're going to be using this edge loop to extend upwards into this post. Alright. So with that being said, oh, actually, you know what? No, we're not. What am I thinking? We're making the nut, not the washer. I forget everything I just said about 2 seconds ago. Instead, we're going to scale this so that the post will fit basically up through this. And I know that you can see here that this is completely rounded. This is something that if we wanted to do, well, at least this is how I would do it here. Because you can see that it's sort of rounded all the way around here, but then it has this nut shape on the edges. And it's kind of a tricky shape. So the way I would do it is I would scale this out like this, kind of get where, you know, this outside border where it goes back into that nut shape. Select everything, hit W, subdivide it a handful of times, something like this. Grab this inner bit here. I'm actually going to grab all of these edge loops here, hit X and delete edge loop. That didn't work. Maybe I'll have to do them one at a time. There we go. Because we don't need all this extra geometry in there. We just need the extra geometry in here like this. Alright. So now we can grab this, hit E to extrude, S to scale, hit Alt-Shift-S to use the spherize command. Type in 1 to give us a perfect sphere, or a perfect circle since we're working with a two-dimensional shape. Hit Enter to accept it, and there we have our shape just like that. And then fit it like so. And we can kind of see the shape that it has here. We can grab this one and this one, pull it out along the y-axis, grab this edge loop, pull it out a little bit less along the y-axis to give it sort of that downward y-axis, something like so. We can hit E to extrude, pull this out along the y-axis, and do the same on the inside here. Alright, that looks pretty nice. It's not 100%, you know, you could tweak it a little bit more and actually shrink these in a little bit, and that looks a little bit more accurate. And I'll take everything, scale it up a little bit to make up for that. Alright, that looks pretty good. I like that. And again, we can add a smooth shader to this and an edge split modifier. And then we'll just play with our, again, just play with the angles here till we get what we want. That looks about like what we want. And again, it's going to be a small detail. You can see it still looks a little funky in here, but it's going to be a small detail. I think that's going to look really nice, actually. Alright. And is that about the right thickness? I think that'll work. I think that's going to look alright. Okay. Save that. Then we'll add in this washer and this post. So to do that, add in a circle, but we'll change the vertices from 6 to, I don't know, 24. That'll be a good, smooth circle. Drag it up here, rotate along the x-axis by 90 degrees. And we can see that this, the washer here is considerably bigger. I guess not considerably bigger, but it's bigger than our nut. And you also notice that in my reference image, I actually didn't include the washer, partially out of laziness. So, you know, I apologize for poor reference images. Alright, so we'll line this guy up. Get it about where we want it. Center it pretty good. Okay, I think that will work just fine. I'm going to grab it and pull it along the y-axis so that it's just past the edge of our nut. I want there to be a little bit of a separation there. It just helps to add that effect that they're, you know, they're not two objects that are intersecting each other. Okay, so we can tab into edit mode. I'm going to hit 1 to go into front view mode, E to extrude, S to scale, and want to scale it down so that it fits inside of the hole in our nut. And we can also see we're a little off center, so we can select everything and just center it up. Alright. Select this center edge loop again. Going to side view mode. We can kind of see the shape we have here. It starts a little bit bigger, it kind of scoops in, and then comes back out at the top. And then it's a little rounded nub at the top. So, we'll hit E to extrude, Y to walk to the Y-axis. Pull it out about to where the middle of our post is going to be. Scale it down a little bit. Do the same thing. Scale it up. Then we'll hit this. It looks like it has a little bit of a flat lip on it, so we'll go ahead and leave that there. E to extrude, pull that out along the Y just a little bit, scale it down. E to extrude, scale, W, merge at center to merge those vertices at that central point, and then we'll just pull it out along the Y-axis slightly to keep that rounded shape going. And this one we can apply a subsurf modifier to, just to get that nice smooth transition there. So that's looking pretty good. Now let's give this a little bit of depth. You can see it's nowhere near as thick as the nut part. So we'll just select this outer edge loop back here, E to extrude, Y to extrude along the Y-axis. Something like that will probably work okay. And then E to extrude and S to scale, just to give it the defining lip over here since we have the subsurf modifier. And we're going to add 2 edge loops along the edge, just to add that thickness. And we'll hit, with those selected, we'll hit S and Y, scale them along the Y-axis, just to tighten that up a little. Smooth shader. Okay. And that, I think, looks pretty good for our tuning post here. So the cool thing about this, which I'm going to shrink it down just a little bit. I know I said I wanted exaggerated proportions, but that might be a little bit too exaggerated. Alright, so the cool thing about this, and in fact the cool thing about most of what we're going to be doing today is, this is just duplicated across. So basically what I'm going to do, just hit Shift D, duplicate these, line these up, and you'll notice that I'm not following exactly the curve of the headstock, and that's going to have to do with the strings here a little bit later, because I need to leave enough room for the strings to travel from this point all the way to these back posts without actually hitting these posts. Now I think that this headstock is designed with that a little bit more in mind. Mine flares out a little bit too much at the end, I think. I think I'm going to end up with, if I moved this all the way over here, I think that my string would be dangerously close to intersecting with this post. So for right now, I'm going to leave it over here. And these are all minor adjustments that we're going to make once we get the strings on here. We're going to tweak a lot of these little things like this to make that a lot more, I guess, workable with the strings. It's just hard to eyeball when there's no actual strings there. All right. Excuse me. All right, so we got these 3 done. Now, before we go any farther, I want to add in the backside here, because once we get this whole thing done, we're just going to duplicate it and mirror it onto the other side. So before we get started that, I'm going to load in a different reference image here. It just shows the back of these. Okay, here we go. And yeah, that's it's a pretty simplistic little deal here. So I'm going to start by adding in a circle, because we're going to start by building this shape here and then building out and then up like that. So we'll leave it at 24 vertices. Pull it up here, rotate along the x-axis by 90, and you'll notice too again that I'm doing all the modeling with it straight on these axes, and then once it's all done, I'll rotate it to fit on the headstock. But before then, I want to do it this way just because it makes it easier to maintain. Alright. So we'll scale this down. Now, the way that this is set up, and I don't know if I did this very accurately on my my other model here, but this part right here is, I'm fairly certain, where the post is actually coming down. Grabbing my guitar and looking at it. Yep, that is how it's lined up. Okay. So the post that we created is actually coming from this point. So these keys should actually be more offset from the post. I kind of cut some corners when I made mine, which you're more than welcome to do depending on how realistic, how detailed, whatnot you want the model to be. So, but for the sake of this, we're going to try to keep it pretty darn close. So you can see we've got this little circular part that kind of extends upward into this little shaft that goes out here, which then ends in the tuning key itself. So we're going to try to mimic that. I'm going to scale this down so that it matches roughly the size of the washer that we made, maybe a little bit bigger. Something like that, just kind of line it up. This doesn't need to be perfect because it's going to be one of those details that it's going to be hard for them to compare exactly how it's lined up. Okay. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab and move this along the y-axis so that it's behind the headstock, just to give us a clear picture of what we're doing here. I'm going to tab into edit mode, and let's try to get some shape that's similar to this. Now, this is one of those details that, depending on how you're going to be showcasing this particular model, you could really skimp on these details. For example, you know that you're only going to see it from the front, which is what I was doing on my original guitar model, which is why I didn't even bother modeling these pieces back here. Excuse me. But you could get away with that if you know that you're not going to actually be seeing this. We're gonna make them fairly nice looking, just because you never know. So with this selected, I'm just gonna kind of duplicate this shape a little bit here. Gonna hit E to extrude, S to scale, and E to extrude, S to scale, a little bit like that. E scale, W, merge at center. Now, I left this sort of like this, rather than actually going in and extruding in one more time and then extruding out one more time. I left just this simple edge loop here because I can now add another loop cut right in there, center it right there, and just pull it in along the y-axis a little bit. And that gives us that lip right there. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so we'll go and grab this outer edge loop, hit E to extrude Y, and just pull it down a little bit. And now we have this shape here to deal with. Now, there's a couple different ways that you could go about doing that. I played around with a few before I settled on this one. Again, this is not perfect, but it gets the job done. So with this lip sort of in place, I'm going to hit E to extrude again, Y to pull it out along the Y-axis. And then I'm going to basically, let's see, I'm going to hit Control. Yeah, I'm going to hit 3 to go into side view mode, and I'm going to use my brush select tool and select all the faces that I can see, making sure I'm not in wireframe because I don't want to select any of the faces in the back. And actually, now that I look at it, I should probably have done this from top view mode. Okay, so forget that. Go to top view mode, do the same thing. Select these, like so. I'm going to hit E to extrude, Z to pull up along the Z axis, S, Z to scale them along the Z axis. Just sort of flatten them out like so. Like that. And yeah, that's pretty much how I'm going to do that. For this little shaft coming out, I'm actually going to make that a separate piece, just for the sake of ease here. I don't want to try to extrude out a perfect cylinder out of this shape. For the detail level that it's going to have, it'd be fine just to throw something in there. But one thing I am going to do here, excuse me, man, catching something, or I don't know. Go back into edit mode, select this edge loop here, just hit E to extrude and scale it in a little bit just to give it that lip here. So we're going to hit Control 2, add a subsurf modifier, and add a smooth shader and just check out how we're looking. Okay, and I'm just going to tighten up these edges here by adding in some edge loops, and there we go. I like that. I think that looks pretty solid. Okay, so for this next piece, I'm just going to add in actually, you know what? We're going to do this like this. We're going to add in a cube, because we're going to start here and then extend this out of it. That's how we're going to do this. So we'll go and add in a cube, scale it down, tab it into edit mode, and then we just need to kind of basically get the shape here of the tuning key. So I'm going to take these, scale them along the z-axis a little bit, pull this along the x-axis, add an edge loop in right here, scale it up along the z-axis, something like so. Select everything, scale it along the y-axis, and then grab this front face here, scale it along the y-axis more, so it's a little bit thinner. Okay, going to add 2 loop cuts right down the center, and then 2 loop cuts right down the center here. So if I add a subsurf modifier, it gives us pretty close. Pretty close. So now we can take this and adjust the shape a little bit. Pull these in along the x-axis. Okay, that looks pretty good. I like that. One thing I'm going to do, tap out of edit mode, grab this and move it, line it up over here with our deal. And this is going to be, as we can see, connecting right along in here. So we'll line it up accordingly. Something like so, and we can scale this up so we can kind of see our the proportion here of how the size of this compared to the size of this. So that looks alright. Tab back into edit mode on this. I'm going to grab these, scale them along the z-axis, and then scale them along the y-axis just to sort of get them a little bit more even. And actually probably just scale it up in general. Make sure that doesn't look too weird. I think that looks okay. So we're going to hit E to extrude, X to pull along the x-axis, and then scale it down, E along the x-axis, scale it up, and then E along the x-axis and just pull it all the way through here. We'll add an edge loop in to solidify that, and we can see from our reference that it kind of gets a little bit thicker as it gets to this end. So we'll grab both of these here, scale them up. Then we have something that looks like this. I'm going to add in an edge loop here to tighten up that corner there. Hit our smooth shader. Take a look around. I think that looks pretty good. I like it. Alright. So with this in place, again, we can do the same deal here. Shift D and just line these up. We'll have to make sure to give us enough room to where we could actually turn our tuning key. That's very important. Okay. So far so good. And actually I'm going to pull these down, a little bit. Kind of going off my reference. Let me undo a few times. I realized I did some moving around without selecting everything. Always make sure you got everything selected that you want. Which, if you want to deselect something very quickly, you can use the box select tool and use the middle mouse to deselect it. Okay. Now we can put these a little bit closer here. Sorry for the tedium again. Sometimes there's just not a lot to say when not really doing a whole lot. Okay, so we're going to call this good for this. Now, let's go ahead and line these up along the face of our fretboard here, or headstock, I guess. So I'm going to take these, select those, rotate them around so that they look pretty close, grab and move them along the y-axis so that they stay lined up where we had them. And then just make minor adjustments until they look like, they're pretty much lined up. Okay. Do the same thing here. Rotate, then pull in along the y-axis. Alright. What do you guys think, huh? I like it. Alright, so now that we've got that done, I'm going to select all of those, deselect this, hit Shift D and X to make sure I keep it locked along the same axis. Let's see here. Actually, before I do anything, one thing I want to do is I want to join all these into one solid mesh just for the ease of this next step. So with everything selected, I'm going to hit Control J. That all looks good. Now we can take this, hit Shift-D, pull it along the X-axis. I'm going to hit space and type in mirror, which as you can see is also Control-M. Hit that, hit X to mirror along the X-axis, Enter to accept it, and then we'll just pull these back along the X-axis until they are roughly lined up the same. Something like that. And there we go. That'll do for right now. You know, once we get, like I said, once we get the strings on here, we can make some fine-tuning adjustments. Fine-tuning, that's hilarious. All right. So now we can jump in to the neck portion here. So I'm going to go back to my the last reference image I was just using, and we're going to take a look at this piece right here, which is called the nut. This is basically just a thick piece of either plastic, or if you've got a fancy instrument, bone, that just kind of rests right here and serves as the pivot point at the top of the neck for the strings. So this is the point where they're going to hit this nut and then, you know, go back to these posts. So it's a fairly simple shape. Just going to add in a cube, drag it up here like so, scale it way down, line it up, and we want it to basically be right at the point where our neck pivots. So, you know, it's going to be right here, just like so. And then we're going to scale this along the X-axis, and we want it to extend just a little bit farther than the neck itself, because you can see it's sort of, you know, coming through a little bit. It's, you know, that's just kind of the way they look. And we'll pull it in along the Y-axis a little bit, because it's not super high up. Okay. I think something like this will work out fine. Hit 3 to go to side view mode, and we can see it's got like a little bit of an angle. So we'll just give it that little bit of an angle. Just pull this out along the Y just a little bit. I'm going to select everything, hit Control B, and give it a little bit of a beveled edge, just so it's not quite so sharp. Like that. Add our smooth shader. Okay. That looks pretty good. Simple as that. The only thing, though, is that our neck is now a little bit rounded, and this is just a little bit flat. So I'm actually going to add in 3 edge loops here. I'm going to select this center one, turn on my proportional editing, and then pull it out along the Y-axis and just increase my fall off here till I get something that works pretty good. Again, it's not a lot of roundness, but it is some. Okay. There, that looks a little bit better. I like it. The next part we have are the actual frets themselves, which we're going to use this same piece to act as the base for our frets. So I'm going to hit Shift-D, pull that down along the Z-axis, kind of line it up here. And rather than just scaling it, because I don't want to mess up the bevel here, I don't want to scale that bevel. I want to leave it the same. So instead, what I'm going to do is in wireframe mode, just grab this whole top section. Oh, turn off proportional editing, this won't work. Grab this top section, pull it down, grab the bottom section, pull it up. And from a side view here, I'm going to grab this entire portion here and pull it back along the Y-axis to flatten it out. And also grab this one and pull it up, because they, much like the nut, you can kind of see them extend beyond the neck, but not quite as much. Okay. I think I'm actually going to select both of these end pieces here, turn on the proportional editing, and pull them back along the Y-axis a little bit, and then pull the whole thing forward just a tad. Something like that will work. Okay. I like that. Now the way we're going to do the frets, we could use an array, you know, to just put them down the neck, but there's a few problems with that. One, the neck gets thicker as it goes down, which means our frets are going to have to be wider, and also, frets are not evenly spaced, not even a little. They are basically, the distance between the frets gets smaller the farther down the neck you go, and it's all following a very complicated mathematical formula that has to do with the way vibrations sort of, the smaller the thing vibrating, the less space you need, or the smaller length of the string, I guess. Something. I don't know. I'm not really a scientist. I know it's probably shocking to hear, but yeah, I'm not. So the way we're going to do the frets is, unfortunately, there's no real easy way that I found around it. We're going to do it one by one, hitting Shift D, moving it down along the Z-axis, lining it up with the reference image, pulling it out along the Y-axis just a tad until it matches, and then scaling along the X-axis so that it is just coming out of the side of the neck just a little bit, like so. And unfortunately, we're going to be doing this for all 22 or 24 frets, depending on which guitar type you're making. But fortunately, now that I've shown you basically what we're doing, you don't have to sit and watch me do the whole thing. So I'm going to pause the recording, put all the frets on here. You know what we're doing now. So I'm just going to get all the frets on there, and then I will be back with you when I am done. Okay, so you can see I just went and put all the frets on the fretboard using the exact same technique I did on this first one, so you guys did not miss anything. Now the cool thing about this is we could really be done at this point. But there's one other little piece of hardware that I want to take a look at on the neck itself, and that is this little deal right here. Now what this is a little piece of plastic that's covering up a hole in the neck right about here. Not all guitars have this. Some guitars just have the hole. Fender Stratocasters being one that comes to mind, where they didn't bother to cover it up. And there's basically, if you were to look inside the neck of the guitar, there's a metal rod, sometimes more than one, but generally just a single metal rod that goes down here that is connected to a little apparatus up here that allows you to make adjustments, which will actually adjust the neck if it starts to bend out one way or the other. Because, it's made of wood, it will eventually warp and change shape a little bit. And this just allows you to make some fine-tuning adjustments. I will recommend, however, that if you own a guitar that has one of those, don't do it. It might seem cool, like, oh, I can make fine-tuning adjustments on my guitar. If you don't know what you're doing, this is one way to royally mess your guitar up. So now that I've explained it to you and shown you exactly where to find it and how to adjust it, I have to have faith that you will not do it. Alright, we're going to make this little cover anyways. One, because, it's on the guitar, and it looks kind of nice. It gives it a little bit of thing, a little bit of a classiness to it. And two, a lot of times they put, they don't on this guitar, but they put like the guitar model or some sort of, insignia here. And we might actually do that on this. You could put like your own signature on this guitar or something like that. So we can have some fun with that during the texturing phase in the next part. But to make this, it's actually fairly simple. We'll add in a plane, pull it up, rotate along the x-axis by 90 degrees. And this is another one of those parts of the guitar that you can just have a little bit of fun with the design. I'm not going to copy this exact design. I'm going to kind of do my own thing, as I did on my previous one. I'm going to do something more similar to that. So I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to pull this up along the z-axis, turn off my proportional editing, scaled it way down, add an edge loop, scale it out. Just kind of have fun with the design. Do what you want. This is one of the more signature pieces on the guitar. Yeah, something like that will work fine for me. Now, you feel free to do something crazy and just weird shaped or whatever you feel like doing. Tighten up this edge down here. Okay. Select everything. Hit E to extrude, Y to extrude along the Y-axis. Not a lot. And then, similar to how we did our pick guard, I'm going to add an edge loop right down the middle here. Hit Alt-S and just scale it out along the normals a little bit, just to give it a little bit of that lip feel to it. Okay. Then we're going to add some edge loops in here to sharpen up those corners there, something like so. Add a smooth shader. We'll rotate this so that it fits on our headstock nicely. And yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. We'll add these screws on here real quick, which we unhide our guitar body by shift selecting this first layer to have them both selected. I'm going to grab this screw, duplicate it up here, scale it down a little bit, and just sort of line it up where it goes. 3 to go into side view mode. Select all of these, rotate them, and move them back along the y-axis. Make some minor adjustments to the rotation. Okay, I like it. And with that, our guitar neck is finished. Our guitar body is almost finished. Like I said, I forgot one little piece. So let's add that piece in really quick, and then we'll make a few final double checks and minor adjustments to the guitar itself. And we will be ready for part 4. Oh man, very exciting. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and collapse this window by clicking and dragging on this little tab here, just to expand my view. Alright, so the piece that I forgot is the strap pegs down at the bottom, and there's one on the back of the guitar that actually hook onto the guitar strap, and that's what holds it all together. So luckily for us, it's a fairly simple piece. So we'll add in a circle. 24 vertices is fine. And I don't have a reference image of this, so you'll just have to take my word for it. And all of these, all the strap pegs I've seen, they look a little different, so we have a little bit of a creative license here. So first thing I'll do is I'll scale it down to something about like this. Yeah. Hit E to extrude, tab into edit mode, E to extrude, Z to pull down along the Z axis, E to extrude, S to scale, E to extrude, pull it down along the Z axis, scale it out just a little bit, E to extrude. Actually, I'm going to add another loop cut in here and just scale it in, give it kind of a scooped look. Grab this one again. E to extrude just a little bit down, and then I'm going to scale it out quite a bit. E to extrude along the Z axis, something like so. E to extrude, and there, it kind of, most of the ones I've seen anyways, they kind of collapse in at this point, so we'll extrude that, pull it up along the Z axis, and we're actually going to put a screw right in there, which actually screws through this into the guitar body. And yeah, just for the heck of it, I'm going to add one here, scale it out, just to round that out a little bit. Okay, it might be a little bit big. Well, maybe not, I don't know. I'll let you decide how big you want it to be. One thing we will do though, and it is a little bit big, is we will pull this about right in the center of the bottom of the guitar body, just like so. Then I'm just going to add a smooth shader and an edge split modifier. Turn up the angles here. Okay, that's how we like it. Alright, let's add that screw in really quick. I'm going to use another one of these rounded screws from the second part here. And we'll just kind of rotate it around. And we'll scale it up and just kind of fit it in that little section. Something like that. And that's going to be good. Cool. Now we'll select both of these. We'll hit Shift D to duplicate it. And on this particular guitar model, the second strap peg is actually right about back in here. Just about like that. Sometimes, you'll see them up on these posts up here, or on this little cutaway up here. Sometimes not. But yeah, in this one, it's right there. Okay, that's it for our hardware. All right, now we can focus on our strings, get this thing finished up. Now the strings are fairly simple because they are actually just curves. So I'm going to Shift A, add in a Bezier curve. I'm going to rotate it along the x-axis by 90 degrees, or I'm sorry, the y-axis by 90 degrees. Yeah, there we go. Tab to go into edit mode. And basically what we need to do is set a point here at any point that the string is going to change directions, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and select everything, scale it way down, move it up over here. I'm going to scale down each of these points because I don't want there to be a lot of curve, or almost any curve in the string at all. But our first point is going to be, make sure I grab the right point here, right here inside our bridge area. And I'm going to go ahead and line this up with this far string here. Okay. Our second point is going to be right at the apex right here, which we can pull that along the y-axis till we hit that. And also straighten out the rotation of this so it doesn't look all weird. And actually, now that I think about it, this is probably going to need to be more forward here. Okay, yeah, that way it looks like it's bending right out of this point here. Going straight out of there. Going up, hitting this. We'll take this point, we will extrude it up the whole neck here. And we'll rest it right in the center of our nut. And line it up about where it's going to go. We'll have to make a lot of these adjustments, as we go, after we get it done. We'll extrude it out one more time, take it up to this first post. And that actually almost went right about where it needs to go. Okay, so now we have our first string in place, and you can see that there is obviously some adjustments that need to be made. There's no way the string should be this far off of the neck. But again, it's one of those things that's hard to identify until you have the string there to visualize it. So the first thing I know I need to do is I need to tilt our neck back a little bit. So I'm going to just go to the neck layer, select everything, shift select this layer again. And this is one of those things that's just going to take a little bit of finagling, a little bit of doing. But with the neck, everything on the neck selected, I'm going to put my 3D cursor right here, change my pivot point to 3D cursor, and just rotate it a little bit. Oops, what am I missing? Oh, I'm missing those screws there. Okay. So just rotate it a little bit back. Reselect my string, tab into edit mode. Move the adjustments so that it now matches where it's going to go. Double check. Still needs to be more. So we're just going to repeat the process again. I think the reason, yeah, these screws are on layer 1. Oops. We don't want them there. So yeah, it's just kind of a one of those annoying processes, but you really just, you got to get it done. And I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me fine-tune this thing. If this one doesn't look like it's working, well, I'll just pause it and get it adjusted. You guys can figure it out at this point. Yeah, still needs a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, get back to you guys when I've got this adjusted out to kind of show you what it should look like when it's all good to go. Okay, so I got it adjusted about how it should look in real life. Now, the more I look at it, I'm not sure the neck should really be tilted back quite so much. In fact, I'm going to look at my actual guitar here. Really, well, I guess it's got a healthy slant on it. And you could adjust it a little bit by adjusting the height of this bridge, which would change the angle at which it's going. So there's a lot of little things you can do to adjust it, but for the sake of this, I think, it doesn't look half bad. We switch to perspective mode. Everything on it, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. I like it. So with this one string in place, we can kind of see we need to make a few other little adjustments here. For one, our neck in general down at the bottom here, it looks, I think the neck turned out a little bit thin. You can see that the strings are almost off the neck at this point, whereas up here, they're, more about where they should be. So let's see about adjusting this really quick. I'm going to jump over to just my neck layer, layer 2. I think of an easy way to do this without having to adjust everything. Well, one thing I can do is I can select all of these pieces on the neck, selecting my neck last, and hit Control J to join them all into one piece. Tab into edit mode. Select just this bottom section here, or actually just this very bottom face. Something like that. Turn on my proportional editing so that I can affect the whole neck. Scale it along the x-axis, and then just scale up that area of influence so that I can affect everything on the neck part. I don't want to affect the headstock, but definitely the neck. Okay, let's take a look at how that looks. That looks a little better. So you can see the string is now, actually on this portion of the neck. All right. So without, taking too much more time here, let's finish up this string. I'm going to get this string all finished and ready to go, and you can then use that knowledge to put the rest of the strings on, because it's the same process for all 6. So to give the string some thickness, we'll go up here to our object data panel, and we'll set this fill option to full, because we want it to be, we want to have a full string. And then we just adjust the bevel depth here, and you can see that it thickens up that curve. And at that point, it's really just up to you to kind of get these sized accordingly. One thing, if you're not, if you didn't know this, the strings get thinner. So the string here is going to be the thickest string, and each one down the line going from left to right is going to get thinner until the one down here is, fairly thin. So I'm going to just go ahead once again, pause the video, throw these strings on here, let you see how it's going to look when it's all finished, and then we will be done. Okay, so I got all the strings on there. You can see that the thickness changes as we go down. Up here, they all hit that nut, that pivot point, and adjust themselves up along. I did have to move in or adjust the positioning of these posts here to make sure that these strings weren't hitting these posts. So if you need to make some minor adjustments, now's the time to do it. Take a look at our side view. We can see we have a nice even distance off the neck, all the way down. That looks pretty good. Everything looks really nice on the strings. So with this tutorial is finished, or at least this part of this tutorial. So we've got all the everything on the guitar is modeled and ready to go. So yeah, I hope to see you guys for the next part, which is going to be UV unwrapping and texturing everything on this that needs textures, which we're pretty much only going to be, once again, texturing the body and the neck itself. We may do a little bit like up on, this little truss rod cover if we want to put a little insignia or logo on there. But most of this other stuff is just going to get basic materials. So the only actual real texturing we'll be doing is on, again, on pretty much the wooden parts. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it was not too long. Tried to keep it as short as I can, but there's a lot of little detail in these things. And yeah, so I hope it all works out, and I will see you guys in part 4 for the texturing.